first emperor's tomb. And it's at the center of what is thought to be the largest burial complex in the world.
The story begins in the spring of 1974 in the quiet countryside near Xi'an, China. The land stretched out in soft rolling fields, and for centuries, farmers had tilled the earth without ever suspecting that beneath their feet slept one of the greatest secrets of human history. That year, during an ordinary attempt to dig a well, the shovel of a farmer struck something hard. At first, he thought it was simply a stone, but as the soil was brushed away, what appeared was not rock at all. It was the face of a soldier, carved in clay, lifelike and stern, staring back with an expression that seemed frozen in time. The farmer and his companions had no idea what they had found. Yet as archaeologists arrived and excavation began, the truth spread like wildfire. What lay buried beneath the ground was not a single statue, but thousands. Entire regiments of life-sized warriors, crafted with astonishing detail, stood in formation. Each soldier had unique facial features, as if modeled after real men who had once lived. Beside them were horses, weapons, and generals. The farmers had uncovered the edge of what we now call the Terracotta Army. This discovery was breathtaking enough to capture the imagination of the entire world. Yet, as researchers studied the site, a far greater revelation emerged. These soldiers were not an isolated creation. They were guardians, sentinels built to protect something far more important. All evidence pointed toward a massive tomb nearby, an underground palace said to hold the body of the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang. The emperor's mausoleum had long been the subject of legend. Ancient texts whispered of wonders and horrors entombed within, but for over 2,000 years, no one had dared to break it open. Even when the Terracotta Army was revealed, the central burial chamber of the emperor himself remained untouched. The reason was not only the warnings of deadly traps, but also the reality that archaeologists lacked the technology to safely preserve whatever secrets might be hidden inside. To understand why this tomb inspired both awe and fear, we must consider its scale. The burial complex of Qin Shi Huang is not a small chamber or a single grave. It is a vast necropolis, sprawling over 50 square kilometers, larger than many modern cities. The Terracotta Army is only one corner of this enormous site. The emperor's resting place, at the center, lies beneath a giant mound of earth over 70 meters high. For centuries, it appeared like nothing more than a grassy hill. But below that mound, radar scans and surveys have revealed hallways, chambers, and subterranean structures more complex than any tomb discovered before. When the Terracotta Army was first excavated, it was hailed as the find of the century. Yet from the beginning, whispers spread among locals and archaeologists alike. What lay inside the sealed chamber? The answer was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The historian Sima Qian, writing in the 1st century BC, described the tomb in chilling detail. He spoke of rivers of liquid mercury flowing through channels, a ceiling painted with the constellations of the night sky, and mechanical traps designed to fire arrows at intruders. For years, such accounts were dismissed as exaggeration. But soon, scientific surveys of the soil around the burial mound revealed mercury levels hundreds of times higher than normal. It became clear that the ancient stories were not myths, they were warnings. At first, researchers kept their distance. The tomb was left sealed. Experts debated endlessly whether to attempt an excavation. Some argued that the dangers were too great, not only the mercury, but the possibility of destroying priceless artifacts the moment they were exposed to air. Others insisted that the world had a right to know the secrets hidden inside. The debate continued for decades unresolved. Yet even without opening the tomb, the Terracotta Army itself provided haunting glimpses into the ambitions of Qin Shi Huang. Each clay soldier was crafted with an individuality that suggested more than mass production. The armor, hairstyles, and expressions varied from one figure to another, as if they had been modeled on real people. Some theories suggest that the emperor ordered his artisans to immortalize actual soldiers of his army, ensuring they would continue serving him after death. The scale of the army is staggering. Over 8,000 warriors have been uncovered so far, though experts believe many more still lie buried. Horses and chariots accompany them as if prepared for eternal battle. And all of this effort was meant for one purpose: to guard their emperor in death as they had in life. But why such obsession with protection? Why such fear of intrusion? The answer lies in the mind of the man buried beneath the mound. Qin Shi Huang was no ordinary ruler. He was the first emperor to unify China, a man whose vision shaped the foundations of an empire that still endures today. He was a figure of both awe and terror, and his obsession with power did not end with his death. Even before the tomb was opened to its chambers, the atmosphere around it was heavy with unease. The Terracotta Army was not simply an archaeological wonder, it was a reminder of the will of a man who sought to control not only his people but also death itself. Standing before those clay soldiers, one cannot help but feel the weight of history pressing in, as though the emperor himself still watches from beneath the soil, waiting. The years following the discovery of the Terracotta Army brought tourists, scholars, and international acclaim. Yet, through it all, the central question remained unanswered. Should the tomb be opened? Was humanity ready to uncover what lay sealed for over 2,000 years? For decades, the answer was no. The tomb remained closed, its mysteries hidden. But time, as always, changes everything. Advances in technology, combined with the relentless curiosity of humankind, finally brought about the decision to open portions of the emperor's chamber. What they found would stun the world and confirm the darkest fears of those who warned against disturbing it. But before we descend into the horrors revealed inside the tomb, we must first understand the man who ordered its construction. Qin Shi Huang was not just a ruler. He was a visionary, a tyrant, and a man consumed by the desire to live forever. To know the tomb, one must know the emperor himself, and his story is one of ambition, paranoia, and obsession that ultimately shaped not only his empire, but also his own terrifying afterlife. The life and obsessions of Qin Shi Huang. To understand why the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is so unsettling, we must step back more than 2,000 years and look closely at the man who ordered it built. Qin Shi Huang was born in 259 BC, during one of the most violent and chaotic times in Chinese history. The land was fractured into rival states, locked in endless war, each kingdom fighting for dominance in what is remembered as the Warring States period. For a child born into that world, survival was not guaranteed. Power shifted like sand, and death often came suddenly. At the age of just 13, Qin Shi Huang inherited the throne of the state of Qin. He was still a boy, yet he was thrust into a world of intrigue, betrayal, and warfare. As he grew, he learned to navigate this deadly landscape with cunning and ruthlessness. By the time he reached adulthood, he was no longer just another ruler. He was a conqueror determined to unite the fractured kingdoms under his control. Through a series of brutal campaigns, he succeeded. By 221 BC, he had crushed all rival states and declared himself the first emperor of China. No one before him had achieved such a feat. The age of warring states was over. A new empire was born, and it bore his name Qin. His achievements were monumental. He standardized currency, ensuring that trade could flourish across the empire. He unified weights and measures so that commerce and construction followed a single system. He reformed the written script, bringing consistency to a language spoken by millions. Roads and canals were constructed to bind the empire together, allowing for faster movement of troops and goods. He began the colossal construction of defensive walls, some of which later formed the foundation of what we now call the Great Wall of China, rarely staying in the same palace for long. He wore disguises, and even his own courtiers were often left uncertain of his location. He built elaborate palaces and passageways, some hated. In fact, they may not have been terrifying enough. The tom described by ancient records, his writings, collected in the monumental text known as the Records of the Grand Historian, described the mausoleum with details so extraordinary that for generations many dismissed them as imagination or political myth-making. Yet as centuries passed, and as modern science probed the earth around the burial mound, these ancient words began to appear more like sober truth than exaggeration. According to Sima Qian, the tomb was no ordinary grave. It was an underground world crafted to mirror the empire above. He described flowing rivers and seas constructed with liquid mercury, designed to shimmer like water under torchlight. The ceiling of the chamber was painted as a map of the heavens, with constellations marked in pearls and precious stones. Beneath this artificial sky and above the metallic rivers lay the emperor's sarcophagus, guarded not only by the Terracotta Army outside, but by hidden mechanisms meant to punish intruders. Crossbows, mounted and loaded, were said to be concealed in the walls and passageways, designed to fire automatically at anyone who entered. Poisonous traps, deadly gases, and collapsing chambers were rumored to stand between the emperor's body and the outside world. The tomb was described less as a place of rest and more as a fortress, a dark empire beneath the earth intended to protect Qin Shi Huang's supremacy for all eternity. For centuries, these accounts were retold as cautionary tales. The people of later dynasties whispered that to enter the tomb was to court death. Some claimed that entire expeditions of tomb robbers vanished inside, their bodies never recovered. Whether these stories were folklore or fragments of truth, one lesson was clear: the tomb was never meant to be disturbed. What made these descriptions more than legend was the discovery of the Terracotta Army in the 1970s. Sima Qian's writings had mentioned human figures buried with the emperor, but no one could have imagined the scale until the first clay soldier was unearthed. When archaeologists saw that his words matched reality, they began to wonder if the army was true. Could the rivers of mercury and deadly traps also be true? The answer came not from digging, but from science. In the years after the discovery of the Terracotta Army, Chinese researchers began to study the soil of the burial mound. Using chemical analysis, they detected abnormally high concentrations of mercury, levels so extreme that they could not be explained by natural causes. The findings aligned almost perfectly with Sima Qian's descriptions. It appeared that the rivers of mercury were not mere metaphor. They were real. This discovery sparked both fascination and fear. Mercury, known in ancient times as quicksilver, was believed to hold magical properties linked to immortality and transformation. Yet to us, it is poison. The thought of entire rivers of mercury flowing in the sealed tomb was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. If disturbed, those vapors could escape into the air, posing deadly risks to anyone who entered. The possibility of mechanical traps was harder to confirm, but ground-penetrating radar revealed complex networks of chambers, passageways, and walls that could very well hide such devices. Though time would have rusted the crossbows and weakened the mechanisms, the sheer ingenuity of Qin Shi Huang's engineers made archaeologists cautious. If they had the skill to create thousands of life-sized soldiers with individualized faces, could they not also have built deadly machines to protect their emperor? And yet, beyond the technical marvels, the tomb had an even more chilling layer: human sacrifice. Ancient accounts suggested that not only treasures but also people were buried within. Some spoke of the emperor ordering that his concubines, artisans, and workers be sealed alive in the mausoleum so that they might continue serving him after death. In the outer chambers excavated near the army, archaeologists discovered human remains that lend weight to these claims. They were not soldiers of clay, but real men and women, condemned to die so that the emperor might not be alone. This mixture of historical writing, modern evidence, and archaeological discovery created an atmosphere of dread. Every piece of confirmation made Sima Qian's account harder to dismiss. The tomb was beginning to reveal itself, and it was worse than anyone had believed. The design of the mausoleum also carried profound symbolism. The map of the heavens painted above the emperor was not simply decoration. It suggested that Qin Shi Huang sought to align himself with the cosmos itself, to position his rule as eternal and divinely sanctioned. He was not content with being remembered as a king or even an emperor. He wanted to exist as a figure of life and death. The rivers of mercury, meanwhile, may have served both practical and symbolic purposes. Practically, they created an environment so toxic that decay would slow, helping preserve the tomb. Symbolically, they represented the oceans and rivers of his empire, ensuring that his kingdom lived on underground. The emperor's obsession with immortality and control was so great that he recreated an entire universe beneath the soil, one where he remained the center of power. This is where the story shifts from history into something that feels closer to horror. Imagine standing above that burial mound, knowing that beneath your feet lies a constructed world of deadly rivers, poisoned air, and silent soldiers, all created to guard a man who believed he could outwit death itself. The Terracotta Army was just the beginning. The heart of the tomb was something darker, a maze designed not only to protect the emperor, but to terrify those who dared to disturb. The Chinese government refused to open the tomb. The risks were too high. The potential damage to artifacts, the danger of toxic exposure, the cultural weight of disturbing such a site. All of these combined to make excavation a nearly impossible decision. Archaeologists studied from the outside using radar, chemical scans, and limited probes, but they resisted going deeper. Still, human curiosity is not easily silenced. As technology advanced, as international attention grew, and as pressure from both scientists and the public mounted, the decision was finally made to begin opening sections of the tomb. The world waited with anticipation and dread, knowing that Sima Qian's warnings might soon be tested in full. The legends had spoken of traps, poisons, and rivers of mercury. Science had confirmed at least part of it, but no one was prepared for the reality of what waited inside. The opening and what was found for decades, the burial mound of Qin Shi Huang loomed silently over the fields of Shaanxi province, a hill of earth hiding a legend. The world wondered what might lie within, but no one dared to break the seal. That hesitation lasted until the 21st century, when advancements in archaeology and preservation finally gave researchers the confidence, or perhaps the courage, to enter. The decision was not taken lightly. Even before the first stone was shifted, debates raged among scholars. Some argued that it was better to leave the tomb untouched to respect the emperor's eternal rest. Others insisted that humanity could not turn away from a treasure of history, no matter the risk. In the end, curiosity triumphed. The work began. The first stages were cautious. Teams drilled narrow shafts into the soil above the mound, lowering instruments and probes into the darkness. They wanted to measure air quality, to test for mercury levels, and to map chambers before anyone stepped inside. The results confirmed fears. Toxic fumes filled the sealed air. Concentrations of mercury vapor were dozens of times higher than safety limits. The atmosphere itself was deadly. Special protective suits and air circulation systems were prepared. Only then did the archaeologists step into the darkness. What they found shook even the most hardened scientists. The air inside was stale, heavy, and dangerous. Masks and oxygen tanks were required, and yet even with them, several researchers reported dizziness, burning throats, and sudden waves of dread. It was as if the tomb itself rejected their presence. But the danger was not only invisible gases. As they advanced into the chambers, they discovered the remnants of ancient mechanical devices, contraptions of wood and bronze, rusted with time but still recognizable as weapons. Some were crossbows rigged to fire when a door was opened. Though centuries had robbed them of their lethal power, the design alone sent chills down the spines of those who saw them. The warnings of ancient records had not lied. Deeper inside, the scene grew even more unsettling. Pools of liquid mercury still gleamed faintly in the torchlight, shimmering like restless silver seas. The rivers, described by Sima Qian, had survived the centuries, their toxic waves lying in wait for intruders. The sight was mesmerizing and horrifying in equal measure. To look upon them was to understand both the brilliance and the madness of Qin Shi Huang. He had ordered not only treasure, not only soldiers, but the very elements of the earth to be reshaped into a fortress for his immortality. The chambers themselves were vast, some with ceilings that arched like the sky of a cathedral, painted in fragments of blue and black where constellations had once glimmered. The pearls that had marked the stars were scattered, some fallen to the floor, some still embedded above, glistening like faint lights in the gloom. It was as if the archaeologists had stepped into a night sky frozen underground. Then came the evidence of something even darker. In outer chambers, bones were discovered. Human remains, scattered and broken, lay in places where no animals could have reached. The positioning and the context suggested they were not intruders but sacrifices, perhaps artisans sealed in with their work. Perhaps concubines entombed to serve their emperor in death. The silence of those bones spoke louder than any treasure. They were reminders that the emperor's paranoia and obsession had claimed not only his own soul, but also the lives of countless others. The deeper the team went, the more overwhelming the psychological weight became. Several members reported feeling watched. Some described dreams of soldiers marching in silence, of eyes staring from the clay figures outside. Mercury poisoning, exhaustion, and stress could explain these experiences. Yet to those who endured them, it felt like something else. As if Qin Shi Huang's will still lingered, furious at being disturbed. Artifacts revealed both splendor and strangeness. Fragments of lacquered wood, painted in colors still vivid after 2 millennia, disintegrated within hours when exposed to air. Intricately designed weapons, some sharper than expected, hinted at the technological brilliance of the Qin dynasty. Symbols and inscriptions